World War II in Sweden. We are going to begin with the scientific racism in Sweden. During this time, there were conceptions that every human were not equal, and some were rated as more valued than others. There were certain requirements for how you should be, and if you in some way deviated from the norm and did not match these requirements, you were not accepted by society. Some of the people that were rated as less valued were those who were mentally ill, epileptics, criminals, disabled people, youths, Romani and minorities as Sami people, etc. There were also scientists that worked on separating those who were considered as less valued from the others, and Swedes were the first people in the world to start a eugenic breed institute located in Uppsala, where the scientists researched about different kinds of people and categorized them. One of the reasons to why they did this categorization was the desire to bring out the best of the Swedes. The thought with this categorization was to create a better citizen and with that a better and more safe society. Another reason to why this categorization and keeping people out of the society took over more were the growth of the idea about the Swedish folkhem. The Swedish folkhem was a social vision of creating a safe society and creating the best Swedish population with the best genes. Those who were different from the norm were considered as a threat to the Swedish genes because they were considered to have bad genes. They believed that one's race and behavior were connected to the genes and therefore in long run could spread and ruin the Swedish population. To make sure they did not spread their bad genes, they were kept in mental hospitals. However, when there was not enough space at the mental hospitals, the victims were forced to go through sterilization so they could be released to society without being a threat of spreading their bad genes. And in the year 1934, it became legally with sterilization in Sweden. Compulsive sterilizations became more and more common in the Swedish society until 1976, when it became illegal.
I'm going to follow up with how the Swedish government and the people treated the communists during 1940. During the Winter War in Finland 1939, the communists were seen as a big threat against the society. The Swedes feared that the Soviet Union would attack Sweden and that the communists would take Soviet side. People saw the communists as traitors. During the Second World War, the government became even more paranoid since both Norway and Denmark had been occupied by Germany. The government wanted to avoid upsetting Germany. Also, in Sweden, there were a lot of people who sympathized with the Nazi movement and was against the communists. So when the government created a new law, in Swedish called Transportförbudet, in 1940, to prevent communistic newspapers to spread all over the country, nobody really cared. Some people even thought they deserved it, even if it violated the constitution, freedom of speech. This was a way for the government to make sure that the communists could not keep mobilizing. Later on, the government even created special work camps for those who did not fit in the society, where mostly of the workers were communists. In these camps, they were supposed to learn how to fit in the Swedish society. But, in reality, they were kept from the society. Also, this time, nobody protested. The communists were treated as prisoners. At the end of the war, the government shut down the work camps and the communists were sent to their home. Today, very few people know about these events.
And now we're going to tell you about the homeless and the vagrants and how they were treated in Sweden during the war times. Living in Sweden as a poor person or a vagrant was very hard during the war times. The society looked down upon them and saw them as parasites, due to the fact that they did not contribute to the system that was called folkhemmet. It was sort of a Robin Hood system, take from the rich and give to the poor, which gave the people, for example, free medical care and free schooling up to a certain age. Being a vagrant was in fact illegal in Sweden during the beginning of the 19th century, and the punishment was labor camps. Even though a few of the vagrants had some sort of education, they still lacked a social safety net. such as family, a farm, or a home, but mostly money, which excluded them from folkhemmet. A vagrant can be compared to the modern day's hobos or homeless, and could be arrested for not owning a home. However, if you are in dire need or under 15, you could receive a small funding or forced manual labor. The people who decided, however, whom the vagrant who was in dire need was the police, and it were not always a fair decision that was made. During the beginning of the 19th century, the living standard was low, really low for that matter, and when the World War II broke out, the standard sank even deeper due to the difficulty of import, and the state was forced to enforce a rationing system to divide the few resources there was. In the wake of all this, the farmers noticed that they could make some income upon this and raise the prices. This was a hard blow towards the poor people. They could not afford the prices from the farms or the prices on the black market. Furthermore, in 1919, universal suffrage was introduced, but with some exceptions. Some of the exceptions were people who had not done their military service, convicts, criminals, and those who were mentally ill and mentally unstable. Begging was seen as a crime. Due to this, they were not allowed to vote.
Sweden has often been spoken of as a neutral country during wars. You would be as shocked as we were when you find out that that statement is in fact not true. First of all, Sweden had a good relationship with Germany before the two world wars, both politic and economically wise. Sweden supplied Germany with steel before the wars, and which was the main material Nazi Germany used for its weapons. Despite these criteria, Sweden had an official neutrality politic. In 1941, when Germany marched into Soviet, Germany came to Sweden with several demands. One of them was to let German troops and weapons to be transported through Sweden to Norway. This was a serious debate within the Swedish government. Were we supposed to take Germany's side and lose our so-called neutrality, or try to stay neutral by potentially become invaded by Nazi Germany? This period of intense discussion is called Midsommarkrisen. So after serious consideration, it was decided that all these demands, including the one I explained, were to be accepted. In this moment, the neutrality that Sweden reached for was no longer existent. Of course, the government felt ashamed and tried to hide it from the Swedish people by using censoring and propaganda. During the late years of the Second World War, when Nazi Germany no longer was the head leader of the war, the alliance pressured Sweden to stop all trading with Germany. That was the requirement if Sweden were to be on the same side as the alliance. At first, we hesitated because we did not want it to seem as we were joining the winning side. But in 1943, Sweden closed all deals with Germany and joined the alliance. Today, Sweden has changed a lot in considering its politics. We no longer claim ourselves to be neutral, but we are in fact militarily alliance-free. Sweden has since 1995 been a member of the EU and can therefore not be seen as a neutral country.